Hey Thomas Tutors, we're moving right along to our very next lesson. Today we're going to be talking about how to multiply positive and negative integers. So let's go over some of the words and key terms that we need to know for this lesson. We know and we're going to discuss integers and how they're related to the number line. So we know that a number line is going to have a positive and a negative side, and in the middle of that number line is the number 0. If we move in the right direction of the 0, moving away from the 0 in the right direction, we have positive integers. If we move to the left of the 0, then we are working with negative integers. So let's keep that visual in our mind when we're thinking of how to treat integers when we are multiplying. We also know what it means to multiply. When we're multiplying, we're repeatedly adding the numbers over and over and over. And they're being grouped by the same magnitude. So let's go ahead and discuss what it means to multiply 5 times 2. Well, in this example, we're thinking of what if I have 5 objects, but twice? So let's say I have 5 green circles. If I want it to happen twice, where I have 2 groups, how many total circles do I have? And if we were to count this all up, we know that 5 times 2 is going to give us a total of 10. Now this is in a situation where we're dealing with both positive integers. There is no sign in front of the number 5 or the number 2, but we know that that means that it's indicating that both of these numbers are positive. So this is a positive 5 times a positive 2 to get a positive 10. So let's go ahead and think about our new ideas. So yesterday I introduced the idea of working with 0 pairs when we're subtracting. We have numbers that are represented by positives, and we have numbers represented by negatives. If we have one positive with one negative, we create something called a 0 pair. A 0 pair. And we know that a 0 pair has a value of 0. We want to think of this idea inside the product box, which is I've represented with this green box here. The product box is going to give us the answer to our multiplication equations. So we need to think about 0 pairs and what are we doing when we're trying to find the product. So if in this equation 6 times 3, we're working with 2 signs. The first sign tells us whether to add or take away from the product. So in this problem, I have a positive 6, and if I have a positive in my first sign, that means I need to add. If I have a negative 6, then it needs to take away. So if I have a minus sign, or a negative sign. Now the second sign, which is coming from my second number, the second sign tells us what type of signs we are adding or taking away into that product box. So in this example, I have a positive 3. Notice how there is no symbol in front of it, which means that I'm going to assume that it's positive. So first tells you to add or take away from the product box, and the second time tells us what types of signs. Are we going to be putting negative signs into the box or taking negative signs out of the box? Or are we going to be are we adding or taking away negative signs? So let's take an example of how to solve this problem, 6 times 3. Here's our product box. I know that my positive 6 tells me that I'm going to be putting things in. But what am I putting in? So I look at my second sign. It's another positive integer, so I'm going to be putting in 3 positive signs. 1, 2, 3. But this 6, the first number, tells me that I need to put in 6 groups of these 3 positive signs. So if I go ahead and put in 6 groups of positive 3s, I'm going to ask myself, how many positive signs do I now have all together? Now if I were to count all these positive signs in my box, I get a total of positive 18. There are 18 positive signs in there. 6 times 3, or positive times positive 3, is going to mean positive 18. So that's what we know about regular multiplication. But what if one or both of our integers is negative? So I'm going to introduce this new idea. Notice how my product box is now filled with a bunch of positive signs and negative signs. The product in this box is still going to be 0. And you're asking why? Well, think of the idea of zero pairs. For every positive that's paired up with a negative, they cancel each other out and create a 0. So you'll notice that there's the same number of positives as there are negatives, which means that this value, the value inside the product box, is still 0. So let's go ahead and examine what does it mean when we're working with the equation negative 6 times 3. Remember, the first sign tells us to either take away from the box or put more things in the box. And since it's negative, we're going to be taking away. We're going to be taking away. What are we taking away? What are we taking away then? We're taking away positive signs because the second number is positives. We're going to take away 3 positive signs. I'm going to cross out 3 positive signs. But I need to take out 3 positive signs, 6 of those groups. So if I cross out all, so here's 3 groups, 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups of positive 3, 4 groups of positive 3, 5 groups of positive 3, and 6 groups of positive 3. Let's clean up that box to show what I mean. If I take away all those positive signs, I now end up with only negatives. So I'm going to count them up. I notice that I have 18 negative signs. So that means my answer to negative 6 times 3 is negative 18. Let's try it if the second sign is negative. What if the second sign is negative? In this example, 6 times negative 3. So a positive 6 tells me that I need to add things. I need to add things into the box. What am I adding? Well, I'm adding 3 of negative signs. I'm adding 3 of negative signs. And I need to do that 6 times. So what if I add 6 groups of negative 3s? Well, if I add 6 groups of negative 3, here is 1 group of negative 3, 2 groups of negative 3, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups of negative 3. So I just added in 6 groups of negative 3. So notice how I have less zero pairs, but I started off with a neutral field where there were only the value of the product box was 0. And I added 6 groups of negative 3s, which then gives me a final answer of negative 18. Because if I count up all the negatives, since there are no other positives, I have 18 negative signs, which means my answer is negative 18. And lastly, we have the example of negative 6 times negative 3. This is minus sign, this negative sign in front tells me that I'm taking away from my box. I'm taking away from my box. What am I taking away? I'm taking 3 negative signs each time. How many groups of negative 3s am I taking away? I'm taking away 6 groups. So I'm going to cross out these 6 groups of negative 3. There's 2 groups of negative 3s, 3 groups of negative 3s, 4 groups of negative 3s, 5 groups, and 6 groups. Let's clean that up. If I take away those 6 groups, my product box is now left with 18 plus signs. 18 plus signs, which is why negative 6 times negative 3 is 18. Positive 18, because I have 18 positive signs. Let's go ahead and summarize that. If my first factor is positive and my second factor is positive, then my answer is also going to be positive. But when there's an example where either the first factor or the second factor is negative, then my product is going to show up negative. If both of my factors are negative, then my answer is going to be positive. So remember these trends to help you guide thinking to solve this problem. What is negative 6 times negative 9? So I know you're thinking, I have this box, I have this product box, and they're filled with a bunch of 0 pairs. My first digit tells me I need to take away things, because it's negative. My second sign tells me that I need to take away negative signs. I need to take away 9 negative signs. And how many times do I have to do that? I have to do 6 groups of negative 9s. So the answer to negative 6 times negative 9 is equal to a positive 54. Now it's your turn. What do you think is the answer to 7 times negative 4? Ask yourself, are you adding or taking away from that product box? And are you going to be taking positive signs away? Are you adding positive signs? Are you taking away negative signs? Are you adding negative signs? Once you decide that and visualize it, you will arrive to an answer. And I thought it'd be nice to give you a challenge as well. What if you have more than 2 factors? What if your equation has 4 factors? Post in the comments either questions that you have or an answer to this problem. Good luck!